Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, OnPay. Without them, we could not be sharing these stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Jeremy Duvall with 7Factor Software. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lee.
Before we get too far into things, tell us about 7Factor. How you serving folks?
Yeah, 7Factor Software is a software engineering as a service company based here in Atlanta. I have employees in Austin, Atlanta, and Denver. Our primary focus is helping folks develop custom software of varying flavors. That can be anything from a mobile application on up to something that's scalable and runs inside Amazon, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, all of those sort of fun cloud platforms.
So now, is your client somebody who has no kind of software and then you build it from scratch, or is it, do they have an existing something or other and then you kind of upgrade it into this new improved custom?
Yeah, great question. So we have we work for a big business in town, folks that you probably know, the local airline, and down to some very small customers that come to us with absolutely no idea what they want. I've worked with non-technical founders, so that's those people you mentioned that don't have anything, and perhaps they don't quite understand how they might go about building their idea in the cloud or using custom software, to existing teams that have some asset that they want us to come in and either take a look at and retrofit or own a piece of and develop, and using our own software engineering methodology, or even just, kind of sitting in their teams and working with them to help just augment them and make them go faster.
So I would take it that if you're working with a non-technical founder, but these are companies that have some sort of funding. This isn't kind of a low price venture. This is something that is kind of a growing or enterprise level service.
Yeah, that's right. We've done everything from a $25,000 project for a local founder that had his idea and sort of self-funded to working with folks with venture capital, on up the chain to, the $1 billion club with, the local airline and a few other folks in town that you probably know about.
Now, so what do you consider your sweet spot?
Yeah, our sweet spot is that we're polyglot engineers. And that sounds kind of crazy. It's kind of a weird word, right? But what that means is that our development teams are able to work in any software engineering stack. Kind of the traditional way of thinking about developing software is it's a bit like you have to, get the person that has the exact skill set needed in the door in order to implement your particular piece of software. But we've kind of moved beyond that, to be honest, in technology these days. We have so many cool languages out there like Go, C#, JavaScript, Vue, Angular, all these cool frameworks. And so our team members are encouraged to be what we call polyglots. And that means I can go and use something like object-oriented programming to develop something in Java, and then I can turn around and use similar ideas and sort of patterns to develop a similar software, or if not the same software, in something like .NET. So our edge is that we can work in any stack and any cloud platform, because we like to think of ourselves as computer scientists and not consultants.
Now, are you using the word software kind of interchangeably with website?
So sort of. It's a great question. A website is made of software, right? But it's not necessarily the entire scope of what we do. There's also, usually when you go to a website, there's a back end involved, and that is something like an API, right? You may have heard of that word before. But there's a lot of moving pieces to developing what we call software. So maybe you have a mobile application that runs on Android and iOS, and that communicates back to and stores information in the cloud. That means you have to build the mobile application, and you also have to build the APIs alongside of it. And part of the point there is that software is a lot more complex than most folks think it is, because you fire up your Android app and it kind of does its thing and it works just magically. There's a lot of work work involved in designing and building those things, including websites. So if I go to Facebook, for example, Facebook has an amazing amount of technology behind it that services the experience that you have when you go and log in and start looking at your your friends' feeds and whatnot. So we cover all of those pieces. We can build mobile applications, we can build a website, and we can build any of the corresponding back-end pieces that make that website actually work.
Now, when you're working kind of in the startup realm, some startups, when they're just starting out, they're like cobbling together different kind of open source, free, whatever, low price things, and to make a website that is useful, right? Yeah. But you can come in and create kind of more proprietary, probably something that works a little bit hand in glove with a lot of different things because you're building it from scratch, right? And then it doesn't have all those hiccups and challenges that all these kind of cobbled together systems have.
Correct. And the other thing to think about when you're kind of bringing a bunch of disparate systems together, like you mentioned, is integration is actually hard. It's one of the more difficult things to do in software engineering. And, let's say that I'm taking 4 or 5 pieces of open source software, putting them together to create my product. That's a perfectly valid architecture. Oftentimes it's difficult to scale, though. And by scale, I mean, what happens when you as a startup founder are sitting there with 100 users, and now all of a sudden CNN picks up your app and they display it on their website, and now you're getting hit by hundreds of thousands of users. There's a lot of really fun stories out there that talks about this, what's called a thundering herd issue from a scalability perspective. So we also can do the cobbling pieces of software together to create more, sort of a seamless experience. But the big issue there is you have to make sure you're solving the scalability problem. The custom software is absolutely going to be designed and built to handle those scaling issues because we're thinking about things like, am I going to set up a load balancer? What does even that mean, right? What is a load balancer? Most folks don't know that, when you go to google.com, you're actually being routed to thousands of potential servers because they have the ability to balance your load, which is the whole, name load balancer, across multiple machines. And so startup founders typically don't need to think about this until you start worrying about how your app is going to scale in the face of having many users as opposed to just 1 or 2.
So is there kind of are there breadcrumbs that let me know like, hey, this is time you better start saving some money to invest in this, or does it just kind of punch you in the face at some point?
It kind of punches you in the face. To be completely honest, I mean, we've worked with a lot of startup founders and we tend to develop systems ahead of time to put the scalability points in. But here's the issue. Scalability is expensive, right? So you're going from having perhaps 2 machines behind a load balancer to, in order to support thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, you need to scale that up to maybe 100 machines. So you've just multiplied your cost by an extraordinary amount. So part of what we want to do is we want to start tracking that. We want to start thinking about, okay, how is your marketing playing into the users that are coming on the platform? So another thing that we do that not a lot of software engineering companies do is that we're very much about the business problems that we're solving. So hopefully myself and that startup founder or one of my staff engineers or someone on my team that has experience in that particular vertical will sit down with that person and say, okay, what's your marketing plan? How are you guys going to make money? I mean, the big thing that I ask, like a lot of people see vendors like me as, well, you're here to take my money. While we do need to pay mortgages and keep our engineers employed and happy, we certainly are looking for ways that you as a startup founder are making money. And we always challenge folks to think about that and come up with a plan. So we'll sit with you and say, hey, how are you going to monetize this idea? And then we'll plan those scalability points with you. And we'll say, okay, we'll start out with, double the amount of capacity we need. And if you have 1 user, that means we're going to plan for 2. And so on and so forth until we make sure that you are ready and able to handle those punches in the face, which, actually you can hit that too. Nintendo, I don't know if you heard about the story back with Pokemon Go. They could not handle the amount of people that came onto their system. And this is a huge gaming company. It wasn't actually Nintendo, it was one of their contracting companies. But this is, folks that should know how to deal with scalability that literally got punched in the face by this same problem. So it's not something that you can plan for precisely, but you can usually get pretty close.
So when a client works with you, they're able to kind of gradually engage with you. It doesn't have to be a binary, okay, budget $100,000. It might be we can start here and with a roadmap that can end up being $100,000, but it'll kind of grow with the growth of the company.
Correct. And that's a big differentiator that we have from other consulting companies like the big boys and girls in town is we like to work with startups on a budget that you have. Sometimes I have had startup founders come to me and say, okay, this is my idea and this is my budget. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, there ain't no way you're getting that done in that amount of money. Trust me. I've been doing this for 16 years and that you're just way in over your head. And we will have those candid conversations with people. We have a saying around here. We like to interface with folks using kind candor, right? I don't want to be mean about it, but at the same time, if there's no way that you can build like a super sexy MMO in a $10,000 budget, I'm going to be the first person to tell you that because you're wasting your time, and there's no way that that's going to happen, right? So we do work with folks gradually and incrementally to try and get them to a position to where they are profitable, they are making money, and you have our entire team of product engineers behind you to help craft, how you're going to market. We have a few partner companies that even do user experience, which is something that we don't like to do because it's not really in our wheelhouse. But we like to provide that sort of end-to-end conversation with companies so that how you're making money, the software assets are good because we're building them for scale. And, here's how we might be able to support you long-term with hopefully what we would like to be a long-term relationship until either you hire your own engineering team, which we're happy to help you with that as well, or, we continue on and you sell the company.
So what's your backstory? How did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, so my backstory is kind of interesting. I grew up in a small town in North Georgia called Blairsville. I don't know if you've heard of it. Not many people have, but it was a great place to grow up. And my dad was a single parent, and my mom died when we were really young. And I ended up, going through high school and kind of just cruising through, and went to college at a local college up there called Young Harris. And I graduated from there, and my mentor, a guy by the name of Bob Nichols, looked at me and he said, "You know what? You should go to Georgia Tech." And I said, "Okay." So I applied. It was the only school I applied to. I know that's kind of ludicrous these days. Like you should apply to like 50 schools, but it's the only one I applied to, and I got in. And I went to Georgia Tech, and I actually ended up failing out of tech, which is kind of a different fun story. And I would love to find the person that let me back in. I wrote an appeal and I got back in, and ended up being a 4.0 student from there on out. So kind of that failure in my life was what motivated me to get back into something that, I really wanted. I was going to one of the most prestigious, CS institutions in the Southeast, and I had failed out, and that was a big deal to me. And my dad being a single parent and kind of running the roads for us, he was a contract driver for the mail service. It was really just kind of a heartbreaking thing for me. And I didn't understand why this had happened to me. So that failure has really stuck with me for the rest of my life. And it's transformed a lot of my work ethic, and it's turned me into someone that just works super hard. Like I like to tell people, I'm not the smartest guy, in the room, but I'm certainly the guy that will outwork everybody else, because it's about providing the experience and making sure that I am doing everything I can to solve problems for customers and also for the companies I worked for. I got lucky and got hired by a company called Danger. We built the T-Mobile Sidekick. I don't know if you know about that phone.
Absolutely. I had one.
Yeah, I love that thing. And some of the coolest and smartest people I've ever worked with in my entire life were at Danger. And, I was flying out to Silicon Valley, hanging out with people like, Andy Rubin was our CEO, with Joe Britt, right? Really cool folks, Les Hamilton, ZZ Zimmerman, people that, CJ Silvario, she was the CTO of NPM for a bit. So people that have gone on to do amazing things. And Microsoft ended up buying us in 2010. It was the Ballmer era of Microsoft. So things kind of changed pretty quickly there. But I really miss that company. And I sort of model how we 7Factor work after what I saw there, because they had such smart and intelligent people, and they were all empowered to do their jobs, right? There was no micromanaging. There was no sitting around and telling people what to do. It was very much, we were a family. We were a team that were working towards something interesting. And that was this really cool product called the Sidekick, right? A lot of fun stories there that we can dig into maybe in another time. But after Microsoft, I got into consulting, and that's where I sort of learned how to talk to people. So how did I get into this line of work? I failed out hardcore, and then was picked up by this group at Danger that mentored me and grew me into someone that actually cared about the quality of the software that I'm building. Slalom was a different world for me. Again, lots of really good people there, still have friends. That was my consulting intro. And just wanted to focus on building a company that was more about, rebuilding that family experience I had at Danger, where we very much care about each other. We're going at this together, and we're here to build good software using high quality methodologies, and partnering with our customers, as opposed to just kind of being, a head in your team, right? A butt in a seat, for lack of a better term.
Now, when you started kind of creating 7Factor and were recruiting people and attracting people to you, were you purposely kind of creating this culture, or did it develop just kind of organically amongst your early hires?
I was purposeful about it, for sure. And I think that is one of the most important things that you can do as a startup. And I know a lot of the times we're all about the hustle and the grind, and let's get it done and let's get a product to market. But I think you're setting yourself up for long-term failure and heartbreak. I focused very much so on culture being the very first thing that I interviewed for, right? And that's through hanging out with people, talking to them, making sure they had similar ideologies as me. I mean, I don't have a partner, right? I don't have other people that I sort of went in and started this business. I bootstrapped it on a $13,000 bonus check that I got from another company. I found a couple of folks that were great fits for us at the time. Some of those folks are still with us today. And we've just continually hammered on quality being the focus of who we are, right? I want to be known as the software engineering team that I can talk to, because a lot of business folks get a little bit intimidated when they're talking to the developer in the room. And we've gotten kind of a bad rap, right? I was that guy when I left Microsoft that was very much, kind of rude and could be, downright mean to people if I didn't really sort of rev limit my brain in that way. And so I want to be known as the group of software engineers that are the best to work with and that care more about my success than the success of their own egos, right? So we have a saying around here, we're a fellowship, not a pirate ship. So I built a consultancy that takes that seriously and that doesn't encourage people stepping on each other and doesn't encourage us going out of our way to song and dance and smoke and mirrors our way into a big contract. It's very much about when you hire us, you get what you get, and you know what you're getting. And that culture has been very, very foundational to us being successful in the first place.
Now, is there any scar tissue that created that pivot from smartest person in the room to kind candor?
Yes, absolutely. I was working at Slalom and I was doing my master's degree full time, and we were working for Home Depot here in town. And I was on a project, and it was my first, maybe my second project at Slalom. And there was a project manager that I worked with. She's still great friends with me to this day. But I was just in a really bad mood because I was strung out on coffee and doing everything I could to try and complete a coursework master's at Georgia Tech and serve my customer when I worked at Slalom the best I could. And I just remember not being able to deliver a few things and just not being able to talk to that project manager very well. And she called me out on it, and I got a bad review from my manager. And I remember being so mad about this bad review, and I called my manager up and I threatened to quit. And it was probably the most immature thing I've ever done in my entire life, other than stupid things when I was 18. And, this manager was cool enough to sit me down and say, hey, let's go have breakfast. So I went and had breakfast with the managing director at the time of the custom applications and development practice at Slalom, and he sat me down and he kind of walked me through what I had done wrong, and I'm like, look, man, I get it, I understand, and he invested in me, and I'm still thankful to this day for his mentorship and his investment in a software engineer at the time that all I wanted to do was build something that didn't suck. That was my goal, right? And I even told him that. And the thing that I was missing is that I was leaving out the human element of software engineering. A lot of people don't know this. Software it's a community event. It's not one guy or gal in a dark room with headphones on pounding out code to some techno music. It's very much about painting a picture together where everyone is arriving at the painting as directed by your stakeholders, and you have to be able to reach across the aisle and have conversations with your stakeholders or your project managers or other people in your organization in order to be successful at that. So I'm still to this day thankful for those folks for helping me learn that lesson, and it's something I've carried with me always.
Well, the word's soft in software for a reason.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. Talk about what you're up to regarding WellEntry.
Yeah, so we have partnered with a local healthcare company that has 30,000 caregivers on the ground. We currently build a lot of their mobile applications and their APIs and sort of their backends. And I was chatting with their CIO and their AVP of development and their product team, and they posed this challenge. They're like, hey, so there's a lot of regulations coming down the pipe for COVID-19. There's a lot of requirements because they're in the Medicare space. They deal with pediatric home care for Medicare and Medicaid cases. And they're like, we have a lot of compliance issues and a lot of problems that we need to solve for this. So you guys have built our mobile apps. What do you think about talking to us about producing a system that would solve this problem? And they were kind enough to let us actually build that on our own and sort of retain the IP for it. So WellEntry is a COVID-19 screening platform. Granted, we're trying to pivot that to a more interesting and more broader application because healthcare is ready for an IT transformation. I don't know if you know of anybody that works in healthcare, and there's a lot of awesome companies out there that are doing amazing things. But a lot of the way we did things in healthcare are still in sort of 1999 style technologies, where it works and which is great, but it's not the most optimal way to solve it in 2020. So we built this system with that use case in mind. There are 30,000 caregivers. They all have to be able to screen for COVID-19 and do self-screening. Our partners would want to see things about their workforce, like they want to understand who is potentially been infected with or is reporting symptoms of COVID-19, and that actually isn't a HIPAA violation per the US government. So we've created a system that allows folks to understand what their workforce is doing from a screening perspective. And Aviana has then in turn used that for other customers as well. So this system was designed for scale. It was built from the ground up to support large populations of users. And we do a little bit of contact tracing, but it's not like the awkward Big Brother contact tracing where I'm storing your location and doing kind of awkward things with it. Instead, you can think of the WellEntry contact tracing system as very much like just taking a badge and signing into a room. Like anyone who's walked into an office building after hours has to take a badge, and you slap it on a little reader and it lets you in the building. We've developed a system that's similar to that. So we're not tracking everywhere you go, but we are providing information about who went to what area of a campus or of a building or of a manufacturing plant back to folks, so that, for example, if someone does have COVID-19 and they went to the break room and there was an outbreak, we know why, and we can track that information and make more educated decisions about how we run our business.
So is this available for, kind of schools, businesses?
Yeah.
This is available for any type of entity?
Yeah. So our primary industry verticals that we've been very successful in is hospice and palliative care. You can imagine that's a big one because, these folks are not long for this world. And if they were to catch COVID, it would make things much worse. So there's a big push in the palliative and home care world to use things like this, and also to do more testing oriented actions. We've worked in schools as well. We do have a couple of school folks that we're talking to and doing implementations for. That's an interesting area that I didn't know anything about walking into this, like public and private schools. Most of our hits have been private schools. Public schools are a totally different animal that I'm not qualified to chat about. And manufacturing plants. And we're also talking through our partners, potentially public spaces like a zoo. So you would use, for example, your Well Entry Go application would work if you went and screened in at your workplace, and then say you went to the zoo in the afternoon, you could use the same exact screen to get into the zoo, and that information will follow you around across multiple sites.
What about kind of sports?
So we have been talking to a friend of mine. He runs the Indy 500. So we were trying to get into that area a little bit. And my good buddy, Carl Pierberg, he works at Mercedes-Benz. Right now, I don't know if there's a good application there yet. We're definitely talking to folks about that. But that's somewhere I could certainly see the system being used. But we need to chat with those folks and get more requirements before I can definitively say that it's a good fit.
So what's the pain a prospective customer is having right now where 7Factor is the call to make?
I would say if you have an underperforming engineering team, and I'm not attacking any of those developers, but a lot of the times we will do a retrofit of an engineering team and provide some guidance and leadership there. If you have custom software assets that you need built, something that maybe you don't know how you want it built, we're happy to provide architectural guidance and sort of high level guidance towards how you might build a system that works well. If you need to add a shot in the arm for your current team, we're happy to lend a couple of engineers to an existing team, as which we've done with Delta and Cox and a few other big companies in town. We're happy to work that way. Our favorite way to work is to work with smaller startups or mid-cap companies and just basically be your engineering team. So instead of potentially hiring 4 or 5 developers and a director of developer, a VP, you can come to us and we will be your team. That's what we do for Aveanna Healthcare, again, $2 billion healthcare company here in town. And we've been working for them for almost a year and a half now. And it's been going awesome.
So Jeremy, if somebody wanted to learn more, what's the website?
Website is www.7factor.io. Also hit me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to type in my name, Jeremy Duvall. I also go by J-Dove, which is kind of my nickname since high school. I'm happy to connect with you and chat about if there's anything that we can do to help. We're also very low pressure salespeople, Lee. I don't try and sell you on anything because I'm not a sales guy, right? I'm a developer. We just want to build really cool software. And, we've been lucky enough to find people that want that from us. And we've grown very quickly to a 20-person team just through that.
Good stuff. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing your story and congratulations on the success you guys have had.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio. And remember, this work would not be possible without the support of our sponsor, OnPay. Please support them so we can continue to share these important stories.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.